I want to introduce myself really quick. I'm Andre Carroll. I'm the state representative for the 201st Legislative District.
Hello and welcome back to Behind the Eyes of Our Youth from Martin Luther King High School in Philly, where we talk about anything and everything. My name is Eileen. For today's episode, we had a dope conversation with Representative Andre Carroll. Mr. Carroll represents our school's address in Harrisburg.
Yeah, I know you're like, what does that mean for you, right? So I guess represents neighborhoods, Germantown, Logan, West Oak Lane. Born and raised in Germantown, been up here all my life. My mom actually went to King. I myself and my grandmother, we went to Germantown. So I live on the other side of the district. I live over by LaSalle, but I've been up here all my life. I'll tell you a little bit about my background, a little bit about my story, what led me to public office. Like I said, I was born and raised up here in Germantown. My grandmother raised me. My father he was arrested when I was 9 months old. Spent the first 20 years of my life in prison. My mother's battled with substance abuse. We know crack cocaine hit black communities really hard in the 80s. My mother was a product of that. So I was raised by a single parent grandmother. After graduating from Germantown, I went on to go to Paris College, a small college downtown. Then I transferred to Temple. After that, I had an opportunity to go work for the Philadelphia City Controller's Office, which is the financial watchdog of the city. That was my entry to government. And when I got offered that job, I didn't even know what a city controller was. So if you don't know what a city controller is, that's fine. It's just literally city council appropriates funds approved by the mayor. The city controller literally oversees the dollars and makes sure that there's no fraud, waste, or abuse. I'm pretty sure you've heard those three terms a lot in the last year, right, with the current president that we have. But there's officers who's been doing that work for decades, long before this gentleman was elected. But that was my entry. I worked on a couple campaigns, worked in a couple other legislative offices, state senate. If you know Councilman Isaiah Thomas, I used to work for him on the campaign side. Kendra Brooks also is another person who I've worked for. I really got into public office because I just truly believe, because my father's incarceration, I just couldn't fathom or understand how a man who had never committed a murder could spend so much of my life in prison. And literally it was a phone call because my father, because he was in federal prison, was located so far from Philadelphia, I never would ever ask my grandmother to sit in a car to travel that far. So I never got a chance to meet my father until I was a month shy of my 21st birthday. But because of that, it really also inspired me to just figure out how the systems impact the communities that I come from. And as kids or young folks, we a lot of times don't have the words to articulate exactly how we're feeling, right? As a kid, I've been in a lot of situations. They're like, "How you feeling?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." The traditional response, right? But actually, I wasn't, and I had to figure out exactly how the world was impacting me. And through that, I recognized that servicing other people was healing for me. Like being able to meet people where they are and find out their needs and how I can be helpful. And that continued to help me through my journey. And that's something I continue to lead with, because what I recognize is that a lot of us are not good. And it's okay not to be okay. But, I also recognize that people believe that government should be efficient and should respond to the needs of people, which I agree. But it hasn't always been that way. So, I say, I don't hear my story. I don't see myself in politics. And I'm tired of going into so many rooms as a staffer for another elected official, and I hear so many older folks talk about what young people need. And I'm just like, that's not what young people are talking about. That's not what we want. And, I said, I'll take a chance on myself. I betted on myself. I ran for office the first time in 2022. I lost. I came up 1,500 votes short. And you're talking about a district that I represent now that's 66,000 people. Such a small margin, right? But I came up short. And I raised $100,000 in that race. We knocked over 10,000 doors. I thought it was enough. Election day, we found out it wasn't. I said, that's fine. 2 years later, I came back. I ran again. And that's how we got the seat. So that's been a state representative for now about 18 months. If you don't know, city, state, and federal, we all do separate budgets. So city council has their own budget, state has their own budget, and then Congress down in DC has their own budget. So sometimes you see the government shut down, that's DC. They get all the media attention. But we did have a budget passed last month. Our budget was delayed about 5 months, but each fraction of government does have its own.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Andre. My
Sure.
name is Makai.
Okay, nice
The
to meet you.
question I got for you is, so how would you be able to like process going through that as a kid, like your mom, and then your father being in jail? Like, how would you be able to process? Like, what made you like keep going?
My grandmother, I talk a lot about my grandma. My grandmother now, she's deceased. I lost her a few months after I graduated high school.
Sorry
So I
for your
graduated.
loss.
Thank you, I appreciate you. So I graduated in June of 2009, and I lost my grandmother in October of 2009. Makai, being real honest with you, I really honestly didn't fully understand what was happening. I just understood that my mom was in there. She would just come and go, and I knew that my dad, he would call. It's kind of one of those things. It's like you don't know any other life but the life you live. So especially as a black person, as a poor black person, we only know to keep going. So I didn't really know how to unpack those things, and especially as a man, as a black man in this country, you recognize that there's not a lot of space for us a lot of times to be able to be vulnerable or try to really give our feelings because that's not really how society allows us to show up. So processing it, it was a day-to-day thing. Some days I acted out, some days I was cool, some days was better than other, but I just never try to lose hope. I think that really was just the thing. Like, my grandmother, she was just such an inspiration. I just watched this older woman, like, who just, took 18 years out of her life to raise another kid that she didn't have nothing to do with, right? And I think that always kind of, like, inspired me because I'm like, she don't got to do this,
Oh yeah.
And I think that, a lot of times when we getting raised by mom or dad, we take it a little more for granted because, like, I ain't asked to be here. You put me here, right? But, like, when it's a grandparent, for me, it was just like, you deserve to be on the beach somewhere. You did what you
Oh
needed to
yeah,
do.
retire. Like yeah.
Yeah, so it was a day-to-day thing, but my grandmother, I think she also she overcompensated like most black women do. She gave me more than most of my friends. She gave me more than most of my cousins. I was the only grandkid for a long time until my little brother was born. This in 2009, he was born when I was 18. But she just gave me the world. So I mean, she did what she could. But I
Appreciate
think
that.
I didn't recognize fully the magnitude of life until I was grown.
I appreciate you sharing that with me.
No problem.
How you doing today? My name Luther McNeil. My question is like, how was the push for you? You going to high school, not having your mom or your dad, you just having your grandmom in your life.
I heard McNeil. What's your first name?
Luther.
Luther. Nice to meet you. Not having my mom and dad. It was challenging. It was like I remember being in elementary school, and I remember parent teacher conference night, and everybody, mom or dad, comes up there, and then it's like my grandma, and it's like I'm a kid, like everybody else is a kid, right? And kids are a little mean sometimes. It was like, well, where your mom at? Where your dad? I'm like, I don't know, my grandma here though. Like what I'm saying? Like that's all I had to offer. So I mean, some days it was challenging, and then because especially also too, I knew the reality back at home. But a lot of times when I was in like social spaces with my peers who are other kids, you just try to block that part of your life out, right? You just try to be as normal as possible. So I mean, it was challenging, but I think when I went to go run for office, I remember sitting down with like staff, like some of the staff that I had hired, and we go through this thing where you try to like tell the story yourself, and you really try to define who you are before, because what I'm eventually going to do is have to share this story with the world, and then I have to allow the world to then have a perception of who I am, right? And we watch people who like on TV do it every single day, right? And I think that was the first time I had to really wrestle with myself, how much of myself I wanted to share with the world. And I think, for me, I kind of tried to empower myself. I said, I want to be a lived experience candidate. And the lived experience candidate for me was that when I talk to people and I tell them who I am, I want them to see their self in me. I think a lot of times with elected officials, we see this polished person. We see this person who went to an Ivy League college, or they come from stock where their parents were somebody great and done great things and set them up for success. And I was like, well, the neighbors I live next to, that's not my reality. That's not their reality, right? And when I started to learn more about my district and finding out that the people in my zip code, the average person makes less than $40,000 a year. And we know right now in America, $40,000 barely might get you a can of soda after you done paid rent and your utility bills and went grocery shopping, right? You know, so I just was like, I got to be honest, and that's the only thing I know how to be. And so it just became one of them things. It was just like, look, people will have their opinions. They will say what they want to say. But at the end of the day, if you be honest with people, energy is real, right? They always say real, recognize real. So when you hear somebody tell, like, sir, you can tell when a person being fake and when they being honest. I said, look, I can just tell my story. I don't know nobody else's story, but I can tell my story. And I just hope those who've been impacted by this world the same way I have recognize that, there's somebody out here fighting for them, somebody who sees their story and can advocate for them in rooms that they can't see.
Okay. All right. I have another question.
Sure.
Being a black man, you had to fight for the job you had. Like, how hard was it for you being black to fight for state representative?
You know, the world is different, right? And for every identity you hold, it'll be a different struggle. And being black, being a man, being poor, being young, like these things right here all present a different challenge. So, being black, man and man, being poor is already one thing, but then also in politics, being young is a whole nother thing. So you're dealing with it. Most people who enter politics or have already lived the life of a career somehow or some facet, right? Normally politics isn't their first like real job. They normally going to do something else and then they come back to run for office. I had been a server. I had worked for other people, but like my career had been extensive as some of my other folks. But what I recognize is that like that's exactly what government needed. Government needed a new voice. Government needed a new opinion, a new way of doing things. Because what I recognize is that each generation has a different set of challenges, right? Like when you talk to your parents, right? I'm pretty sure your mom and dad say something to you, and you like, the world ain't like that no more,
Yeah.
or that ain't what's going on, right? And you feel like there's a disconnect between the advice that they giving you and the life that you live in. It's just a generational thing. It's a generational thing, right? So what I had to pride myself on is that I'm not like y'all. I don't think how y'all think. I ain't live the life that y'all live, and I ain't doing things the way that y'all do things because, in my opinion, I'm like we losing people. There's people every single day that I meet that's like I'll never vote. I'll never participate in that system. They don't see the value. They don't understand how it really impacts their life, and they don't see how government literally will save them from the ills. And until we get a person into office that literally destroys some of the resources that's already been in place been put in place by other folks, right? Like last year, seeing so many people across this country lose access to SNAP benefits. Just last week, to see people healthcare double. I'm watching people on social media talking about like this gentleman I know. He got a family. He's like I used to pay $1,000 a month for healthcare. Now his payment's $3,000. They tripled overnight, and that's because people in DC decided that they're not going to extend the Affordable Care Subsidy Acts. That's real. For some people that's just a news clip, but the reality at so many people's kitchen tables is that they like I don't know how I'm going to feed my family this month. If you're going to take $300 out of my household and SNAP benefits, that can be the difference between if my kids eat tonight or not. So I'm like, we got to do something different because whatever we're doing currently, people don't feel it.
My name Alim. My question for you is, I think it's important for us to see like you being here because it give us another perspective to like see somebody in office. Because usually I think like you said, like a white man in a suit or something, knowing that you told us your story and where you come from and how you had to persevere through the challenges that you face, that some of us face in this room, is important. So my question is like, what did you already accomplish for our neighborhood, or like what are you trying to accomplish for our neighborhood?
Alim, right?
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
Good
to meet
morning. Thank you for that, and I appreciate the question. I appreciate all the questions, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk about some of the work that I've been able to do in these last 18 months and some of the things that I want to do. You know, it's been a challenge to get here, and I recognize also it's going to be a challenge to stay here. Like literally this morning, my chief of staff Aisha, when I was coming here, I asked her, I said, I lean on my staff sometimes like to just preview to give me a preview of what I'm walking into. So I'm like, she scheduled this, and I'm like, do I need to wear a suit, right? And she was like, she had watched some of the previous, clips and the videos that you guys had made, and she was just like, I haven't seen nobody else wear a suit. And she was like, I think you should just like wear regular clothes. I was like, okay, cool. So when I got dressed this morning, I took her advice, right? I'm glad I did, right? So Miss Aisha was right. So and trying to be relatable, like that's just like my thing is just like I just want to be my authentic self. Any room I walk into, there are some rooms where I'm like, look, I gotta wear a suit. I'll be honest with you, I'm more comfortable in sweatpants and a t-shirt than anything else. But right, but I heard a teacher say as I was walking in, you gotta dress for the room that you're walking into, and that's real. Like so, depending on the day that changes. As it pertains to the work, so some of the stuff I was able to get done last year. One of my favorite people in the world was Bayard Rustin. Right, Bayard Rustin. If you don't know who he is, he's a black guy with gray hair. He had like a little afro. He stood behind King doing the "I Have a Dream" speech. For so long, Bayard Rustin has been ignored and washed out of history because of the fact that he was gay. And Bayard Rustin has done amazing work, and he's impacted all of our lives in this room because if it wasn't for Bayard Rustin, that "I Have a Dream" speech never happens. He literally organized that march on Washington. It wasn't King who organized the march. It was King who gave the dynamic speech, but someone who had to make that march possible. And it was Bayard Rustin who did that. And because of his sexuality, they just shunned him out of history. But I'm like, that man had been an organizer for decades, and he's right here from Pennsylvania. He's from Westchester. And as a state representative, I thought it was important that we highlight other Pennsylvanians, regardless who they are, where they come from, creed, color, religion, that doesn't matter. When you do the work and you impact people's lives and you live a life of service, that's important. So one of the first things I did when I got to Harrisburg was introduce a resolution, and Pennsylvania became the first state in the country to recognize a man who's impacted so many black people's lives across the country. That was important to me, right? Also, he was a Quaker. Germantown, if you don't know, is we have a long history of Quakers in this neighborhood. So I thought that was also important. Second order of business for me was also small businesses. Coming out of the pandemic, I thought that we need to be doing more for our small businesses. I mean, every young man in this class, the most essential business for you is what? As a man, what's the thing that changes your personality, changes your confidence, changes how you feel? No, come on, not clothes. Before you even get dressed, it's something you get done every 2 weeks, every week sometime. Your haircut. Thank you. So barbershops. Yeah, barbershops was like most essential as a man. And I was like, I want to be able to move barbershops forward, right? So through like listening, I didn't know when I got to Harrisburg, when I got sworn in, I didn't know how I could fix or how I could improve barbershops. I didn't know that they was broken, right? I'm just like, they work for me. I go every 2 weeks and me and my barber talk and we got a good relationship and cut my hair for what, 16 years now? We good. But what I recognize is that there's a examiner's board, a barber's examiner's board, right? That has some folks who you and I never see. And these people make decisions on how barbers get licensed, how fast the process moves as far as the applications, who can get a license. You know that like having a felony, things like that, they can deny you. Having a criminal background, they can deny you from just a professional license. And, that's some of the stuff I've learned over the time. So, I said, one of the things I'm recognizing is because out of the 11 people that serve on this board, because we don't have enough people serving on the board, they're not meeting. So that means that when you apply for applications, it's taking months and months and months before you get a response. We need to change that. We need to make government more efficient. I passed a bill out of the House that will correct that and literally make it so that we can be more efficient and move people along the process quicker. Some of the other bills I introduced, I told you, my father, him being incarcerated, the only thing that connected me and my dad was a phone call. If I missed that phone call, when they call, they say, you have a collect call from, or you have a free call from. If I didn't get to the phone, this is back when we had house phones. If I didn't get to the phone fast enough and the voicemail picked it up before me, and I missed that phone call, I got to now wait for him to call again, right? And then if my father needed some socks that month or he needed some commissary and he couldn't make the phone call, we just didn't talk, right? I had to wait for a letter. I was a kid. I'm not writing back. It takes too long. So I had to wait for a phone call, right? That just was my reality. I said, you know what? Far too often, money is the barrier between people staying in touch with their loved ones. You shouldn't miss a phone call from your loved ones, nor should I, because they can't pay for it. One of my most prized possessions is HB 1506, which literally is a bill that would remove the cost of phone calls in state and county prisons in Pennsylvania. Would make it, free for people to call, right? At the end of the day, I grew up in a time where when we first introduced cell phones, they were free after 9 o'clock. You had to pay for your minutes before that. Then they became free after 7, right? Long distance wasn't free. Now, my cell phone bill is the same amount of money every single month, no matter how many people I call, how long I talk. how many people I text, how many FaceTime calls I make, none of that matters. Why are we still living in an archaic system where we charge people per minute because they're incarcerated? They already done lost their freedom. Now you're going to take away the ability for them to stay in touch with their loved ones. It didn't make sense to me. So that's one of the big bills for me. I got some other stuff. One of the biggest things for me becoming a state rep was I thought about a lot of the humane issues, things that just doesn't allow us to be a full human being. And I never really accounted for like economic things, right? And think about like how do we make it so that like folks like you and I get to live our dreams, but also to be able to fund government in a way that allows us to be able to take care of young people, education, take care of our seniors, and just make it possible for people to exist. Because that money has to come from somewhere, right? So one of the other big bills I have is the Creative Enhancement Tax Act, right? Where literally there's a lot of people who are content creators, right? That's a big thing right now. You as a content creator, you think, how does government help me? Or you think about like a person like Candace Owens, right? Or Don Lemon, who has like these internet shows, like they have to film that somewhere, right? Or you think about when a big production comes to Pennsylvania, like Rocky or Creed, right? A lot of times they're using New York talent. They're using talent from other states. So I'm like, if you're gonna come use my city to film, you need to use people who live here. You need to invest into the economy that live here. I want you to stay at our hotels. I want you to eat our food. I want you to use my people. I want you to pay our taxes. And that's what my bill would do. My bill would encourage folks to come to Pennsylvania. Right now, the film tax credit is $100 million. You're like, I know you're like, what is the film tax credit? Simply, if a production comes to Pennsylvania, we use tax incentives to incentivize companies to do it here versus to do it somewhere else. So if I'm going to give you $100 million tax break, that means that you would want to come here versus if another state maybe offers you $30 million. Right, so that's what we battling. So I would try to increase that to $400 million, and also incentivize any projects that's underneath $5 million, which is like a middle class Americans, right? Like when a lot of times we think about tax breaks, we think about the ultra wealthy and rich. I'm not with that, right? I want to make sure that Black and brown folks, people who are everyday Americans, people who are on the lower economic scale, are able to live out their dreams as well. So these tax incentives will also help folks who have small scale projects. So those are just some of the things. I probably could talk to you all day, but I don't want to bore you.
I'm Shaheen. Nice to meet you.
Shaheen?
Yeah.
Okay, nice to meet you.
I don't know if anybody asked this. I was a little late, but I was wondering if you would ever like try to shoot for a bigger position, like from representative to anything else.
Shaheen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that question. The reality is, I'm gonna be very honest with you. I shared this with the class earlier. Being young, Black, and poor, coming up, growing up from this neighborhood, I never saw myself being elected at all. That just wasn't a dream. I can tell you 10 years ago, I was a server. I was busting tables. That literally was how I make my money. I didn't have no health care. I was in school. I was struggling. I was driving Uber and Lyft to be able to pay for my classes. I just wanted a degree. I barely knew what I wanted to do with my life. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, would I be sitting here in front of you as a state representative and a lawmaker? I couldn't have told you that. There's no way I could have saw that. I had to let life happen and things start to unfold. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful right now to have the opportunity to serve my neighbors, to wake up every day and be like, look, the issues that you got, I can solve. And if I can't solve, I'll find out who can. A lot of times in life, we got to make a phone call and ask the person the question, right? When I was a staffer for other folks, I had to do the same thing. And it got so annoying to me. I'm like, I would just do that. But it's the barrier because I'm not the person elected. I don't have the power. Now, when my office sends an email, they respond back like that. If I send it from a Gmail, I got to wait 7 to 10 business days. But if it says at PA House, they're going to respond like that. And recognizing that power is what keeps me going every single day because I know that I can impact people's lives every day. So what the future holds, what God has for me, I don't know. The things is I guess want to stay open because at the end of the day, what I recognize is, unfortunately, in government, there's not enough people who care. It's not enough people who's willing to do the work. So that right there already puts me in a tier of folks that's small. That right there gives me the hope that whatever becomes available, if my heart says that that's where I need to be, I'll get it. So I'll just wait and see. But right now, I just want to focus on the 66,000 people that I represent and continue to make decisions for 13 million Pennsylvanians.
Now that you got the,
Can I get your name?
my name DJ.
DJ?
D.
DJ, nice to meet you.
Now that you got the position that you wanted, do you feel like you really have the power to like do everything that you wanted to do before you got the position?
Do I have all the power? No. Do I got more power I had before I got elected? Yes. I mean, that's the short answer, right? Power is subjective, right? Power is about the perception of the situation, right? Right? You know, power can't sometimes can't be defined by measure. It has to be sometimes defined by impact. And what I recognize is that the impact that I can make today is far greater than the impact that I was able to make before I put my hand on that Bible and took that oath of office. So in this moment where I'm at in life, I think this is the right thing. It won't be forever, right? Like I tell my staff and I tell folks who I confide in all the time, I ain't doing this forever. I'm young enough to be able to do this job, retire, and go do something else. And I think that's how life should be lived, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't live in a day and age of our grandparents and our parents where they work jobs 30 and 40 years at the same. I'm like, you go clock in at the same place 30 and 40 years, I commend you because I'm a millennial. I ain't got, my attention span ain't that long. To be able to stay at the same place for 40 years, I'm going to get bored at some point. And you know what I'm saying? Like, so, you know, the thing about this job is every day is something different. Literally yesterday, I'm out giving out water, knocking on doors, literally down the street because of the water main break, right? 2 months ago, I'm standing outside of Ada Lewis because we had a death that, you know, was national news. A young lady I had met over the summer, right? You know, last week I'm at a funeral. You know, next week it'll be something else. The week after that I'll be in Harrisburg. It's always something different. And that's what keeps me going, right? Because the job is just, it's ebb and flows. It's not the same. So, I mean, and also, too, it's about I'm able to solve different situations. And that challenges me. So that keeps me going.
I got one more
Sure.
question. So like, how do you feel like you get along with your peers in the house and like, you know, the rest of the people that you work with?
DJ, good question, right? You know, that's a really good question, right? How do I feel like I get along with them and how they feel like they get along with me,
Yeah,
right?
that-
You know, I'm a rebel. Like I like to fight. Like not physically, you know, but I want to push the envelope. I'm like, we can do more. That's not good enough. You know? So
Pardon interruption.
yep, DJ. So, you know, some days is better than others, right? Some days we a family, and in the other days we still a family, but we fighting that day. I'm like, you know, some days we just disagree. And you know, government is a compromise. You know, you don't come into this space getting everything you want. And like there are things that I will say, and those are my intentions. And then I will go into that room and I'll see what I can get done. And what I can't get done this year, or I can't get done this session, I'll come back next year and I'll try it again, or I'll try something different that allows me to build on that progress. So I mean, every day is different. At the end of the day, I don't care if a person likes me or not. I just ask that you respect me because I'm going to respect you. And at the end of the day, I'm leading with my heart. I just want to do right by people. And if that pisses people off or that ruffles some feathers or makes people mad, then guess what? I did my job. Because one thing I know is so many people that looks like me in this country that's hurting. And at the end of the day, they need a fighter. They want somebody who's going to go in those rooms and say, like, look, flip over that table if that's what you got to do. And that's fine. That's what I do. Because at the end of the day, I'm not trying to die here. So I'm not trying to get comfortable. I'm not trying to make no bid. No, keep the bid. Give me the blow up one because this is temporary. But while I'm here, I need to do what I need to do to improve people's lives. They say impossible. They say can't happen. They say we broke, can't afford that. Well, I say, well, let a pandemic happen. What we do then? We gave everybody money. We gave everybody free health care. We took care of everybody, right? We increased resources tenfold. You ain't gonna never tell me in the greatest country on earth, the most powerful, richest country on earth, that we should settle for homeless folks. We should settle for folks not being able to feed their kids. we should settle for the fact that people can't afford healthcare. Like that's not good enough for me. Like I've traveled, I've seen other places. I know it's possible. So, the pushback is different. Like I'll share this really quick because I know I'll share this really quick. I remember when I was running for office in 2024. When I ran in 22, a lot of people was just like they didn't know me, so they were trying to like define me and figure out who I was. So after that race was real bad too because they really just said some nasty, crazy things that just wasn't true, which is fine. But in 24, I remember when they realized they was like he's the front runner, he's probably going to win at this point. So when you become the front runner or you're likely to get it done, that's when the attacks really get tough because the closer you get the power, the more resistance you experience, right? So in 24, I remember they was just like, oh, he's gonna do this, he's gonna do that, he's gonna do this. A year later, those same people who talk that talk, they shake my hand and say, oh, you're doing a great job, big me up, or I want to be a part of this. How do we sign on this? How do we work together on this? Last year I was a crazy deranged progressive, or whatever you wanted to call me. This year is how do we? And I'm like, that's fine, but let's work together. But I'm glad that the energy that I got is so contagious. It's making you see that this too is possible.
So you know how like she was found behind Ada Lewis and all that, and Ada Lewis is a school that was just shut down and it's not used for anything. It's just abandoned at this point, right? It's a lot of situations like that. I feel like in Philly, like abandoned homes and it's homeless people, and I just want to know like, is there anything that you could do like to change that? Because buildings that like that building is so big that we just don't use.
So there's a lot of dynamics that's happening with that. Is the fact that like one that the building's owned by the school district. The school district is underneath the city's purview. I'm a state lawmaker, so I don't necessarily have the autonomy. The district council member has more control over that situation. But what we did do in this budget, because the mayor had met with us and the her team asked us to be able to give the city resources or opportunity to be able to be more flexible with how they deal with the closure of school buildings. So one of the things that we did was be able to allow them to extend their option. We just gave them the option to do it because I can disagree with like abatements and things like that because a lot of times the developers out of state developers, but it gives them an opportunity to be able to sell the buildings and incentivize developers, because what you're asking is a person who has private equity to invest their money into this project. So and we got to make it attractive for people to put their money in that. So we did give the city the option around to extend their abatements so that they can be able to sell some of the school buildings because we got Ada Lewis, we got Pepper. I went to Germantown before they made that into luxury apartments. That was the issue that we were dealing with there, Fulton Elementary. So you're right. The issue exists all across the city. But we are trying to be creative in ways in which we try to get people to invest their money to be able to do the development. So yeah, we recognize there's an issue. I mean, I met Kata last summer in June, and up in Mount Airy, sweet girl, and it was a very unfortunate situation, but it really Kata reminds me of like so many times in history. It takes one situation to be able to open up a conversation that we should have been having, and that's what we're living in this moment right now. Like a lot of us been knew that like negative activity has been taking place in these spaces, right? And the unfortunate truth is that there's more Kata Scotts out there that we may never discover, right? And yeah, but like that, because of her situation now, we're having a needed conversation, and people are like, look, like I've been saying that, or I've been felt that way, right? And it's going to be government's opportunity to actually make the change at this moment. So we'll see what we come up with. But the state is working with the city to be able to provide the opportunities of how do we eliminate the possibilities of something like this happening.
If you were encouraged or provoked by this conversation, let's continue this discussion on our socials. We're at BEO Youth everywhere. Be sure to like, follow, share, comment, subscribe. Thank you for listening.